Like Lee said, I'm Matt DeRose. I'm one of the business development and enablement sales engineers here at Jamf. It's a mouthful, so we just say BizDev SE instead. It's a little bit easier. I've been at Jamf for roughly 4 years at this point, starting in corporate IT and then moving into the sales side because obviously I'm standing in front of you. I like to talk. Really, one of the things that we're here to talk about today is we're going to really talk about how Jamf Pro ties in with your security stack. So when I started thinking about the topic, the whole thought process behind it was a couple of main things. First, why is this important? Well, it's important because number one, we are living in the world where we need to maybe reassess CIS guidelines, maybe some NIST standards, common criteria, and common controls. Second, we need to understand how Jamf Pro, the tools that we maybe already have in our infrastructure, can help us report on and better talk with our auditors, as well as apply these standard configuration restrictions back down to our devices. And lastly, it's really talking about our conditional access piece to make sure that our end users feel supported so they can gain access to the information that they need when they need it, whether they're on or off of our corporate network. So what we'll first start with is we're going to start taking a look at what a definition of security posture is that we pulled from the National Institute of Standards of Technology. Then we're going to go into some more specific configurations around macOS. Then we'll talk a little bit more about institutionally owned iOS devices. And then we'll finish with some configurations that cover both iOS and macOS from there. Then we'll move into reporting natures that we have built in inside of Jamf Pro. We'll talk through the steps with smart groups, and then we'll deep dive into advanced reports from advanced searches and some of that. And then we'll finish off with conditional access and then move into some questions. All right, definition-wise, it's a lot of words. Essentially, distilled down, it means we're looking at our overall security of our devices, of our network, of our data, as well as of our offices. That's what a security posture really means. How this plays in inside of Jamf Pro really takes a couple of main steps. So let's really dive into the configurations at this point, and we'll start off with the macOS side with the security and privacy pane, which we all know and love right now and probably use a lot of because there's a lot of clicks that happen inside of there, which is great. First off, inside of here, when we're talking through security and privacy preference panes, it really encompasses those settings for File Vault 2, which includes that key escrow. It will also take into account gatekeeper settings from inside of the macOS system preferences pane and allow us to configure our firewall, whether it's blocking or taking on those incoming connections or putting it into stealth mode. And we'll go into that a little bit in detail in just a second. So we're going to first start off with File Vault 2. So how many in the room right now are encrypting their computers? All right. That's roughly 100% of the room, so that's great. I love it. Please, yes, round of applause is awesome. So you all know how File Vault 2 works. So within Jamf Pro, you enable File Vault 2 through that specific configuration profile pane. You're able to go through and require that File Vault 2 password. You can create either an individual recovery key or an institutional recovery key. If it were my preference, I'd be doing individual recovery keys because then we can also enable that escrow for that personal recovery key back into Jamf Pro. Or if you're in a higher security mindset where you don't want it stored inside of Jamf Pro, you can also redirect that key to another server database through another configuration profile payload from inside of there. Really, when we start talking through File Vault, Apple created this really simple and easy to use encryption capability really built into macOS. It's in order to protect that data and privacy for those tools that need to be utilized, but it's also protecting information that's being processed from macOS in itself from there. While enabling File Vault 2, you do have a few options, and the beauty behind those configurations that you can, like I said, we can escrow those keys back into Jamf Pro, or redirecting them to another server, but it gives you the flexibility to fit the needs of your organization from inside of there. And that's File Vault. Next, we're going to talk about firewall settings, something that we all love. So one of the key things that I look at with inside of firewall settings when I'm thinking about, let's say, a computer that's going to be off of network. So when we're looking at a computer that's off corporate network, maybe on a public network, not on a managed network, is stealth mode. Being able to enable stealth mode with inside of that configuration profile enables the fact that that end user's machine won't be opened up to another threat vector through discovery tools out on the network. This may cause some problems if you're searching through the network and looking on IP-based things when they're on your network, but if those machines are primarily going to be within the confines of your walls, stealth mode is not really necessary. The other thing is being able to remotely manage those incoming connections or being able to define what those incoming connections look like for the applications that are installed on the machines. That's a big piece when we're talking through the firewall settings from within inside of there. All right. Next, probably my favorite part with inside of Jamf Pro is restricted software. Not only because we're able to take steps to enable Gatekeeper within inside of system preferences to utilize those built-in native macOS tools to prompt those end users to say, hey, here's where we're at. This just got downloaded. You're trying to install it. We can have that setting to say, you know what, only from trusted app developers or the Mac App Store, whatever that may look like, or free reign if you're an IT admin like we are, right? Because we want to test the software out from there. But also going to that next step from within inside of there with the Jamf agent and getting that binary installed on the machine, we're able to really take the steps to say, hey, we want to look for this specific process. So if we have a new security control that's put into place that says users after November 1st, after November 1st, you're not going to have access to terminal unless you're a developer or you're in an administrative level on the machines already. So we're going to restrict that. So we have sneaky users, as we all do. They think that they can get around the restrictions that we put in place, so they either change the name of the application, but the Jamf agent itself looks at that process ID, the bundle identifier, when the app gets launched, and so goes, boop, hey, you're trying to open terminal. You can't do that. Notification pops up on the screen that you've custom built out yourself with inside of there, and you're able to take those steps to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to restrict these exact process names. I want to delete that application if it is a malicious software that's on the machine or something like in the realm of a torrenting software for an end user that has no need going out to check hashes when they're going through and downloading from other websites. But we're also able to then get email notifications so we are aware when somebody violates those specific policies that we put in place out on those machines. That's really big when we're talking on the visibility side, and that was big for me when I was an admin myself of knowing what was going on and why everything was happening, whether we could determine what vector was coming in if it was just user trying to maybe run caffeine on a machine or not. All right. Another big part when we're talking through CIS guidelines is making sure our machines are patched. How many of y'all are using the patch management console right now? Fair amount?
Well, a little bit.
Yeah, all right, cool, that's great. So Jamf Pro innately gives us a couple of different ways to ensure that our applications are up to date when we're going through. So the first is really through that patch management console. We keep a running laundry list of app versions within inside of there, so you can then either utilize a tool like Auto Packager or create those packages yourself to take the steps to say, hey, we need to make sure that this version of Chrome or this version of Firefox, whatever it may be that has a vulnerability in it, can get patched at a moment's notice. So that's the first way. Second way is we're able to run that policy to auto-update from the Mac App Store. So if we have App Store apps out there, we can get a policy set up to say, hey, check in with the App Store, see if there are any app updates that need to be run, and run them. And lastly, it's really running that policy just to tell the computer to go talk to the standard software update server to see if there's any patch or dot releases available on the Mac OS side from within inside of there. Let's dive a little bit into the patch management side of things here. So it reports the inventory of those pieces within inside of Jamf Pro. This is within the patch management console in Jamf Pro itself. We're able to really take on a few of those main pieces from within inside of here. So it takes inventory of the software titles that are in your environment that match up with what's inside of the defined list of applications there. Second, it's going to present itself to say, hey, you know what? We're going to be able to determine when a new release comes out, and then we're actually able to go through and see and identify how our environment is doing. As you can tell, my environment's not doing pretty great right now. So nobody's on the latest version of Chrome. It's pretty wonderful. So how do we remediate this? So a remediation course for this to get everybody on the latest released version of Google Chrome is building out a patch policy. And then we can actually dictate the version that we're going to be patching out. So you go through, you build the patch for the specific version of Chrome that you want to push out to these computers. And then from there, you take the step to say, we're scoping to these versions. They need to be upgraded from, let's say we're on 6.2 here. They need to be upgraded to 6.4. You're able to take that and push those up. And then verify with inside of the reporting structure here that those machines did take that patch policy with inside of itself. All right. Back into system preferences, because I love system preferences. It's my favorite app on the Mac, being an admin, right? So when we talk through security, a few things that we really want to take a peek at is going to be, first off, Bluetooth management. We're looking at some of the CIS guidelines around these realms. Bluetooth itself is a fairly vast vector for near attacks. So being able to disable Bluetooth or disable Bluetooth discoverable modes on the Mac is something that we can manage with inside of Jamf Pro. Same thing goes for date and time settings. So being able to ensure that your end users are enforced on setting date and time automatically and they can't go in and change those ensures that maybe the threat vector or something to where a certificate expires or there's a non-valid certificate that wants to go in and saying, hey, you need to change these settings to get these things to work. You don't have the option to do that, or maybe get past a restriction that you've put in place on their computer. The next way that we can do it as well is also turning off those sharing settings. How many of y'all manage remote desktop in your environments right now? Cool. Yeah. Makes sense. So you want to be able to ensure that you're the only person that can remote into that computer when that person submits the ticket, right? So we're able to ensure that SSH maybe is disabled on those computers, and then through an MDM command on a per computer basis or via mass action, we can enable that remote view management side with inside of there as well. And the last is iCloud. iCloud is another one of the sharing services that we have available made to us from Apple. Some of us already are using other enterprise solutions for file sharing, so Box, Dropbox, OneDrive, whatever it may be. And maybe you want to control non-personal usage on the computers. So being able to go in and manage iCloud itself, you can go through and specifically disable the iCloud functionality on a per kind of level basis with inside of there. We have it in a slide later on when we're talking about iOS. It functions in the very similar scope the way it does on macOS. All right. So that's macOS. There's a lot of things that we can do to really take a stand and control what it means to really control the configurations on our machines so we can kind of assess where we're at and get moving forward from there. Next is iOS, and we're really focused on institutionally owned devices. And I will make the call out right up front. Supervision is required for a lot of these things, and I'm assuming if y'all are using automated device enrollment through Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager or Configurator 2, you're going to be supervising your institutionally owned devices at this point. This allows you to take those steps to ensure that you can take that advanced step of management on those devices. So some of those recommendations when we start looking at some of the CIS guidelines when we're talking through iOS configurations really revolve around device functionality. They include a limiting of if a user can open unmanaged or managed documents inside of an unmanaged destination, so another application. It's also taking the steps to stop the end users from erasing all their data, to managing the ability to save information onto their personal iCloud accounts and so on. when we first look at it, it's really talking about that idea of managed open-in. So managed open-in is a functionality that allows us to dictate when we are supplying a document or we are supplying any information from a managed application or a managed source, it can only be opened in a managed application. Really, when you think about it, it's if we've supplied you with this information on the device, it needs to stay inside of the company. That's the best and easiest way that I like to think about it. It also works on the same way of managing unmanaged documents being open in managed destinations. So when we're talking through the managed destination side of things, we don't want somebody opening up a malicious file inside of a managed file share, right, on an iOS device. So that's another way that we can prevent those steps. Those settings are found inside of the configuration profiles on the iOS side. So it's underneath the restrictions and then underneath the iOS specific tab. And then it's allowing documents from managed sources in unmanaged destinations or allowing documents from unmanaged sources in managed destinations. So you can pick and choose how you want to go about doing it from there. We talked a little bit about iCloud on the macOS side, but when we're talking through it on the iOS side, it's a bigger deal, right? So being able to go through and take this laundry list of items to say, hey, we want to allow iCloud backup, or we want to not allow it, and we want to force encrypted backups locally from the iOS device on your machine, to really allowing iCloud Keychain so that way you know that your shared secrets that are maybe being signed in with are staying inside of the single sign-on application that you're utilizing, or they're not being shared across multiple devices. Same thing goes for Wi-Fi networks, right? So if it's a managed phone, there's always the potential that a Wi-Fi network can share across multiple devices. All right. This is all pretty standard stuff that we've talked about so far. There's some new things that you've probably saw in the keynote that we'll talk about here in just a second when we're talking about presenting consent messages for enrollment, as well as description of enrollment profiles, what you as admins can do on the devices inside of our new enrollment customizations functions in Jamf Pro. But I just want to talk through a couple of quick things here around ensuring that an enrollment profile cannot be removed. So this is a big piece when it's an institutionally owned phone. So if somebody were to lose a device or somebody were to, I don't know, have a resume writing event and then cut town with their iOS device in their pocket, you can ensure that the device is going to stay managed along the way, because the only way that they're going to go through and be able to get it unmanaged is to wipe it. And then if you're using automated device enrollment, it's going to automatically re-enroll because it has to hit that activation server while it's going through that workflow. This is inside of our iOS pre-stage side of things. This checkbox is big when we're talking about it here, when we're talking on the automated device enrollment side, but you can also prevent that unenrollment and removal of that profile inside of iOS on Configurator 2 as well. So it's something to keep in mind there too. But this is the piece that I'm really excited about. With the release of enrollment customizations inside of Jamf Pro, we're able to take a few extra steps to, rather than just present that small little message when they're signing in with their LDAP credentials when they're going through and getting set up on their first device, we're actually able to go through and build out some of those really big enrollment customizations. So we can see that there's a standard enrollment customization underneath of the enrollment customization configurator here. And what this looks like inside of Jamf Pro is you building out your own kind of workflow. So you can build out a welcome document like we saw during the keynote, the JNUC screens like welcome to JNUC 2019. You can put out the acceptable use terms agreement, and if they cancel that, their device isn't going to be enrolled. It's going to be still stuck in that kind of setup screen state. So you can verify that they understand what they are expected of using on their device, and inside of that acceptable use terms agreement as well, you can dictate, this is what we will be doing on your device to manage it. Here are the restrictions that are going to be put in place. Here's how we're going to configure your mail accounts. We'll take care of all these things automatically for you. So you don't have to go through that in maybe an IT orientation session. So if, let's say, Johnny decides that he needs a new iPad and he's one of our end users, he's been at the company for 6 months, I can walk down and drop that iPad on his desk, shrink wrapped. He can walk through the enrollment steps, go through all of this without any IT interaction. So he's aware that it is within inside of there. How many of you are using the new enrollment customization so far? Have you played with it at all yet? A little bit? Testing it out in your environment, seeing how it works on your test boxes? Cool. The single sign-on functionality here is great too. So if you're integrating in with an IDP, whether it's Okta or Azure or anything like that, you can link in with your single sign-on window there too, so you have a kind of unified identity across the board when they're enrolling their devices. Yeah, it's really great. All right. That's iOS really in a nutshell. When we're talking through some of the CIS guidelines, when we're talking about management of configurations on the devices. The next one is really covering both of iOS and macOS. Some of those are going to be the screen locks. So being able to set parameters when that screen automatically locks from within inside of here. So it's, you set your grace period for up to 5 minutes, whatever it may be within inside of your organization that you decide. This is a recommendation, so that way not anybody can just walk up to a device if it's unlocked and gain access to it. Same thing goes along the lines for password and passcode settings. We have the requirements for length and for complexity requirements, and same thing for password rotation. Jamf Connect changes a lot of these things, because you're going to be syncing your password along the lines with inside of the macOS piece, with Jamf Connect for mobile coming out as well. That's along the lines of the provisioning stuff. There's going to be more to come on that in the coming months. So keep an eye out on what we're doing online and talking about there. But the big thing when we're talking through here is the payloads with inside of Jamf Pro. So here's an example of what the payload looks like with inside of iOS. Being able to require passcodes, setting those complexity requirements, saying, hey, you know, it needs to be a complex password, whether it's alphanumeric or a specific digit length, and also being able to require it right up front. A big piece that comes in here in the pre-stage enrollments is you can actually apply these configurations during setup. So if you say, hey, I want to apply my configuration profiles to iOS during the pre-stage enrollment, an end user cannot actually go through and skip the passcode screen with inside of their iOS devices. So you can guarantee that they're not going to have maybe that hour-long grace period that maybe was happening in the past before they set a passcode on the device. It's going to be implemented right up front from there. And on the macOS side, we see that it functions very similarly. We can select for the local accounts with inside of here, allowing those simple values or requiring an alphanumeric value, passcode length, and then rotation, as well as setting maximum auto lock with inside of here too. So along the same lines, right? So wireless access, being able to deploy your managed network to your devices is a big piece, because you don't want to be sharing your Wi-Fi passwords with your end users, right? Because, you know, we'll use Johnny again as the example. He brings his roommate or his partner into the room or into the office and says, oh yeah, they asked, do you have Wi-Fi? Oh yeah, here's the password for it. And then they are on your corporate network. Who knows what's going on that device at that point, because it's no longer managed. It's not managed by you. It might be managed by another company. It's hard to say. So being able to keep your secrets shared that way is always a really big piece when we're talking through it. So we're able to deploy those managed networks. The newest and the latest one with inside of here is WPA3. This came out with inside of iOS 13 and macOS Catalina. But we're also able to help deploy out your 802.1x networks with certificates, all of those things with inside of there as well. Know that we are able to help out with all of that too. All right. Remote lock and wipe. So macOS remote lock, there's a good story around this, right? So when I was an admin, I had a computer get left on a flight. We didn't know if we were going to be able to get it back. I was able to send a remote lock command to that machine just in case we were able to recover it. 2 months later, the machine showed up, and we were able to get back in and get that end user's data moved over onto another machine. Same thing goes on the remote wipe side. So if a machine grows legs and decides it wants to move out of your office and move in somewhere else, or move on to Craigslist, you can send that remote wipe command to it to verify that your data is safe. And then inside of there, you can also see that that policy has been run to then say, you know what, here's our control of, a computer gets reported lost or stolen. We've gone through within the first, let's say 2 hours, we've been able to send that command from when we first received that ticket to wipe the machine. You have that paper trail with inside of your policy logs and your MDM commands to talk to your auditors about it, which is a big piece. iOS lost mode is another big one. I actually had somebody when I was an admin at Jamf, they lost their phone out skiing. Even worse, me. Happened this summer. I was out on the golf course. I'm an avid golfer, being in sales. You play golf. And my phone fell out of my bag. And I had a cellular Apple Watch, luckily, at that point. I called my admin from my watch and said, I can't find my phone. He threw it into lost mode and played a sound on it. Told me roughly where it was by emailing my playing partner who worked with us, who was one of my AEs at the time, a screenshot of the location of the device. We went over there, and I heard the sound playing, and I picked it up. That blew my mind right then and there. So it was a really great thing to have happen from within inside of there. But same thing goes where we've heard stories of devices getting stolen and people playing the sound over and over and over and over again until the device gets returned. That's probably the best one that I've actually seen out of all of it. Device just randomly shows up on the company's doorstep. Because with inside of there, you're able to put in your message, call us here, it's owned by this company, drop it off with us, go from there. Timely termination. So let's say somebody gets promoted to customer, and you have a policy that you're sitting there and you're saying, you know what? We need to verify that the data on this machine is safe by the time that they are escorted out of the building, that their machine's been wiped or it's been locked, even in the terms of hopefully not legal hold. You have to put a lock on the machine so no more changes can be made. You can be able to really live within the realms of timely termination through these commands within inside of here. So being able to remote wipe a machine when it's their last day, even if it's Johnny again, moves on, gets promoted at another company, he leaves his box open, connected to the network at his desk. You can send that remote wipe command so that way you know that his information on his machine is going to be gone and safe, and then you can repurpose that machine for the next hire. Or being able to send that lock command to the machine. So if you are in a situation to where you need to maintain that data on that computer with nobody being able to access it except for the people with the actual PIN code that you've punched in, you're able to do that as well. We all know and love these screens all too well as admins. So there's a lot of stuff that happens from within inside of here. All right. That's the configuration side of things. That's the stuff that we all do on a day-to-day basis. And we probably do a lot of reporting as well. That was one of the main things that I looked at when I was an admin, is like, cool, like what reporting tools can I can see so I can get a better feel for what my environment looks like. Whether that was through building a smart group that I can view right on the dashboard, all the way into building out advanced searches that I can get emailed on a weekly or a monthly basis. Or going through and supplying some of that evidence through the history and audit logs of who's accessed what file vault recovery key at what point and what time, all the way down to integrating in with some of our partners. If you go on our marketplace, so marketplace.jamf.com, we have some great integrations with Splunk, so that way you can pipe some information over for your change management logs into their SIM tool. And there's a lot of different integrations that allow you to build out some different reporting natures from within inside of there. But when we first look at smart groups, fundamentally, just a kind of level set across the board, smart groups change based on reported inventory. That's the easiest way to think of it. So they are dynamic. They change based on, let's say, I have a machine that's on High Sierra. Lee has a machine that's on Catalina. We can see the reporting structure based on what operating systems they're on, given with the logic that's been built out. It's a really great option for quick views. So if you want to just get a quick glance view of your environment, you can build them out into your dashboard and see what that looks like. Same thing goes for those patch management policies. You can go through and say, hey, you know what? I need to just see what version of Microsoft Office the environments on and then build out your game plan from there. You can also customize these out with extension attributes. Some of those may be in that example of terminal after the 1st of November. You can build an extension attribute using a quick script to find out when that application was last launched. And if it tries to get launched again, if you're not restricting it, it can prompt you with a membership change in the smart group to say, hey, I need an email whenever this membership of this group changes, so you can get a quick glance at it. Our dashboard, we all love it. We all look at it every day. We log in to take a look at our environment. We have a lot of groups inside of here. But the beauty behind these is you can actually take these groups as well and export them into CSV, text, whatever it might be. So if you need to, or XML, so you can supply them to your auditors if you don't want to build out those advanced searches, if you've already built these out for inventory reporting purposes. On the flip side, advanced searches come into play here as well because it's that same criteria-based search that's going to be dynamic. It changes, not able to be scoped to. It's just there for you to build out your reporting structure. The biggest piece, though, that I used when I was an admin was this, the email reporting side of things. So I'm able to schedule those automatic email reports on a specific date, a specific time, and say I want it out on the 1st of every month at these levels. It's a really powerful things that you can supply, kind of if you're in a month-to-month auditing period, or let's say you're in an 18-month auditing period, you can say, this is where we're at. I can keep an eye on where we're at inside of the environment from there. And then same thing for the history and audit logs. You can supply the specific events to your auditors to say, hey, you know what? Steve viewed this file vault recovery key at 1 o'clock. We noticed that there was data missing from this machine or something else. An event happened at 1:04 because they had access into the Jamf Pro instance. All right. Conditional access. How many of y'all are using conditional access with Microsoft, our integration from there? Cool. So what it is it is a, so Jamf and EMS, they really prevent an unauthorized user from using a personal device or an unmanaged device or a managed corporate device that's not compliant with the security policies that have been put in place and is therefore more vulnerable to the security threats out there. This is accomplished by requiring the user to register the devices if they want to have access to like Office 365 or other applications that are then validated through Azure Active Directory. This is how it works. It's a very simplified flow chart. First, the Mac's managed by Jamf Pro. During that management process, when inventory is taken, that inventory is then shared with Intune, and the Mac is registered with Microsoft Intune. Jamf then sends that macOS device inventory over to Intune, and then Intune evaluates its compliance with the policies that you've already built out with inside of it, and then generates a report and enforces conditional access via Azure Active Directory. It will allow access for devices that are compliant with inside of your scope that you've built out with inside of Azure and Intune. And then it blocks access from non-compliant devices. And then it also provides a really easy and user-friendly remediation path. It's powered by Intune and Jamf together, and that's done through self-service. If you've seen the keynote over the past couple of years, it was demoed. Please feel free to take a look at that video as well. It's a really, really awesome user experience to make sure that people can stay compliant with inside of there. Really, the main benefits that we're going to see from the conditional access piece from inside of here is that the right people have access to the right resources at the time that they need them. And then if the device isn't compliant, the users can use self-service for that remediation path, whether it's a passcode compliance or a password compliance on that machine to move forward from there. But the biggest thing and the biggest benefit is that it allows you as admins to advocate to say we can support more fluid workspaces for our workers because we're moving away from the traditional confines of being in our own walls to more remote workers from being without there. So it gives you that power to then come back to leadership and say, this is where we're at. We're able to then verify that they are compliant with our security policies, even if they're off network, and they can still have access to resources from within inside of there, which will make your workers more happy, right? Cool. We covered a lot. I will give you a couple of really great resources to go along from within inside of there. The Jamf IT links are just shortened links to the websites from within inside of there, but it's we have our iOS security checklist white paper. I'll get out of the way for all y'all, and I'll leave this up as well as we take questions. There are underscores within those links. I realize that now that they were hyperlinked, so that's great. That's my fault, my bad. I'm going to call that out now. But they're macOS and the iOS security checklists. Those are the white papers based on the CIS guidelines. Feel free to take a peek at those. They're a really great resource for you to kind of review where you're at with inside of your own environment. We have our white paper on conditional access from within inside of there too. And same thing goes for the marketplace. If you're looking for any of those partner integrations that we do have, those are all vetted and approved from Jamf. And with that, I want to say thanks for a great JNUC this year. And I'm open for questions. If y'all have any, I'm sure there might be a few. If there's not, no problems. We can get to happy hour.
Yep, we got one right up here.
Yeah.
I actually just, I noticed on one of your slides that you mentioned chess. And
Yeah.
You had to delete the application, but is there a way to actually delete chess? Because the
I don't
OS...
know. It was just a joke.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, the OS... well, this is what happens. I actually get audited by security, and they're like, why do you still have chess? Because it's protected by SIP, and I can't remove it. And we're not turning off SIP, so I just saw that and figured, okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's...
Right. Exactly. I mean, like, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I like chess. I love chess, but I'm not that, dependent on it. So, and I can't justify it to security. You can hide it. Right. And we can obviously restrict people from launching it, but like, it seems like... So, all right. Thank you.
That's a troubleshooting tip right there. Machine versus machine on chess.
I think I know the answer to this.
Yeah.
So when you do like a remote wipe or remote lock for a desktop, well, for a Mac OS machine,
Yeah.
when you send the push, what happens if you have to eventually unmanage that machine because it's taking up a license and it's been 6 weeks? If you unmanage it, does that push go away, or is it still waiting on an APNS server to go?
That's a good question. So on the lock command side of things, if it hasn't touched a network, I'm not sure how they stack out. I'm not sure. I'm going to find out. I'm going to find you later on, and I'll get an answer for you.
Okay.
But I'm not sure where that service order kind of lays out when you're pushing out those commands, if one will take precedence over the other. So.
And on that,
Yeah.
without having really to know what to do, the solution that I sort of came up with is if the machines are in DEP, I may unmanage it, but I leave it in DEP.
That makes sense.
And
Yeah.
I have a separate DEP group for lost or stolen machines, and as soon as they enroll, they get the lock command.
Beautiful.
So
that's a really great workflow from there, for sure. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, it's maybe like 1 or 2 a month. Yeah, because I'm in CNN. Oh, okay. So, yeah, we've got folks all over the planet, and people forget them in airports, or they put them in their car and then go to dinner, and...
Well, that makes sense.
Yep, we got another one over here.
Yeah.
What's the best way to screen lock a machine so that users don't walk away and leave their machines unattended? Can you do that via configuration policy?
Yeah, you can do
profile?
that from a configuration profile for sure. So you can set like, hey, maximum amount of time where the screen is set to be like stagnant, where it automatically locks. There's also a training aspect that can come with your users. You can enable what's called a hot corner in Mac OS, to where they can drag that cursor into a corner when they get up from their desk, and they can lock the screen for them as well.
Hot corner?
Yep, hot corner. Yep.
The second question on restricted software.
Yeah.
We've noticed that if you exclude machines individually, the restriction doesn't apply, but if you exclude machines via a static group, it doesn't seem to work.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's chat a little bit more about that afterwards.
Okay.
I'm interested to hear a little bit more about it.
Sure.
And we can see what we can figure out.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I've got a conditional access question.
Yeah.
How can you link Jamf compliance to conditional access? So when you're not compliant in Jamf, you lose your conditional access.
So compliance is set with inside of Intune. Jamf reports that back to Intune, and then Intune and Azure handle that magic on the back end to say if it's compliant or not, and then gives them access to those resources. Yep. Yep.
If you're integrating with a single sign-on system, how do you enforce password policy and keychain?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you with the microphone.
So if you're enforcing single sign-on, like with
Yeah.
Okta integration,
Yep.
and you want to enforce, let's say, a 90-day password policy,
Mm-hmm.
how does that work with, I guess, Firewall and Keychain, and how does that sync together?
Yeah, that's where something like Jamf Connect would come into play. So when let's say you're using Jamf Connect login or Jamf Connect sync, if we're talking the Okta spectrum, verify for Azure, you're able to take those steps to say 90-day password policy. I actually have a countdown on my machine in the corner that says, hey, you have to reset your password in 80 days. Day by day it goes down, and it will prompt the user, hey, it looks like it's password change day. You can build that out, and then it will actually force them to change their password locally on the computer, which then will sync back up to Okta and keep everything in sync from there, and it does all its black magic on the back end to make sure all the passwords on the machine stay in sync. Yeah, that's the best one that I have from there for you. Anything else?
All right, any other questions?
Yeah.
Nope, got another one.
So can you also enforce conditional access if you're authenticating with Okta?
So the integration that we have for conditional access is if you're utilizing it with Intune. Not sure what other ways that you could go through and get something going with Okta itself, but I'm assuming you'd have to have your credentials and probably multi-factor authentication
Yeah,
with inside of single sign-on portal
Yeah.
To gain access to those apps inside of Okta.
Yeah.
But the
This
main
would be
conditional
machine-based.
nothing that we
conditional
have
access.
really machine-based. It's the machine-based conditional access piece is going to be for Microsoft Intune and Azure AD. That's our main integration we have for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, you know what? We got one more.
We could probably take the question offline, too.
Yeah. Doesn't matter to me. I'm here.
So our New York office recently instituted the really secure Wi-Fi settings with security certificates and
Yeah.
802.1x and everything, but none of our other offices use that.
Okay.
All of our other offices use a generic Wi-Fi network that's hidden with a regular username and password. And we have a Wi-Fi configuration for all of our bureaus for that generic Wi-Fi network.
Yeah.
But it's a different Wi-Fi network in our New York office. And I haven't had a chance to test this yet. It's really new. What happens if you've got two Wi-Fi configuration profiles?
It's trying to think here. It's setting order of importance. So let's say it's looking for one specific network, and you don't have that network in let's say your New York office.
Yeah, and that's the problem is
Yeah.
the generic one is also available in New York, but it's like almost dial-up access. It's pitiful.
Yeah. Exclusions are the main thing from there. So, yeah.
That's what I'd been thinking, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome.
All right. Anyone else? All right, great. Thank you guys very much for the thoughtful questions throughout. And thank you, Matt.
Thanks. Thanks for a great JNUC, everybody.